Start the recording. Okay. This is take one of recording session for the voiceover, for the VO, for the Subverse video. Let's go. Storytelling.
Hey, that wasn't my fault. They never told me those crates were full of pure cocainium.
Storytelling.
Why am I not surprised to find you excavating the Imperium's asshole with your tongue?
Storytelling can be a variety of things, used for a variety of reasons, from raising awareness to painting the vast and wide canvas of worlds so compelling and meaningful, so relatable. Writing is an art, and a story is the canvas. It can bring tears of joy, anger. It can keep even the most jaded individual awake at night, thinking about the wondrous things you just made manifest through your art, one word at a time. Storytelling is an art, so deeply meaningful, so deeply resonating, so incredibly
It doesn't matter if you've shagged other people. And I'm not going to stop shagging you if you do.
You fucking bitch!
So much for your bullshit.
You gotta hit me up with a supply drop of that sweet pharmaceutical list, or I'm gonna start sweating all 6 of my balls off over here.
Subverse is a visual novel I found on Steam as I browsed its innumerable and galaxy-sized roster of games to buy, and what caught my eye on this one was this specific review, which made me so unbelievably curious as to what this guy meant. As someone who is passionate about writing, here is something that I could really learn about. I sincerely believe that there is no story that is unredeemable, and if it is bad, then why so? I bought the game on the assumption that I'd be learning something, to listen to what it had to say and draw conclusions. Oh boy. Now, to get it out of the way, if you're somehow still trying to find a semblance of direction in this so wild world, I'll tell you right now, this is a porn game. Most of the Steam reviews praise it on the merit it's a good game that has potential, and it's also really hot. But I'm not here to analyze porn. I'm hardly here to analyze anything. I'm here to praise this game for the attempt, and bring attention to the fact that this piece of work deals with subjects usually considered taboo, and still tries to make something out of it. Art is something incredibly malleable, and to some degree it might even be considered completely alien to classification, since it is merely the way one person sees the world and is portrayed as an extension of that person's mind, way of thinking, life. It cannot be considered merely restrained to paintbrush and canvas, as well as a mere selection of subjects normally considered safe to use, not with that broader reach. To what end are you speaking? What are you talking about? Is this truly necessary to discuss? Is this what you truly relate toward? Those are all questions an artistic piece might arise among a myriad of others, and it brings no answers, only outlooks into some people's minds. It is a way of expression in a world you are unknown. To make the effort to speak aloud is worthy of commendation itself. Subverse plays like your usual visual novel at first, albeit one with a considerable higher visual aspect than you may be accustomed to. It's also not solely restricted to 2D text, its most prominent and well-made part being the space combat, where Subverse turns from perverted, tacky and tasteless porn to shoot-'em-up bullet hell hybrid as our main character, the captain, brings with him a uniquely powerful spacecraft capable of obliterating droves of enemies incredibly quickly. The main plot of this game brings a story about revolution and fighting for one's freedom and right to live their life as they see fit, or rather attempts to do so, as it presents a tyrannical, galaxy-reaching empire run by a religious organization without ever building upon the story, motives, or even giving them a good enough reason to hold the galaxy in such a tight grasp. The game is presented as a fairly epic setting, giving us a band of overpowered outlaws capable of dealing with much more than they let on, as well as a good enough reason to fight against the status quo of this galaxy, with a healthy bit of betrayal, intrigue, and mystery on the side. That is, if the story ever bothered with what's beyond the screen and didn't provide us with a codex containing every single answer the galaxy has ever required. There's a fairly well-known premise in writing called show, don't tell. That is to say, actually build upon the themes you bring to the table properly and make them meaningful to the story instead of writing a book about them and moving on. This is the gist of this game, in my opinion. There's a fair amount of content to explore, yet it doesn't make it meaningful to do so, or even important or rewarding to engage with at all. It merely tells you, by the way, here's how this works, before showering you with the 1500th dick joke in a row. Not that it's necessarily a bad thing, the way it's handled is a problem. I have no problems with non-linear storytelling. Hell, I've played Elden Ring before and I think it's pretty good. However, the difference between the two is in Elden Ring's case, main game stands out as a complete experience and you don't need to seek out the great dagger of goldenrod McGilded loins to understand the specific reason and the exact consequences of you doing this and that, because it's just not important to the story. And more so, it probably won't tell me anything anyway. Maybe it'll explain why there's a bone drawn in the wall or whatever. Everything in between is flavor that you can seek out if you want to, and it'll only ever matter for world building. In this case, if I am going to fight against the government, I need to know why I'm fighting, who I'm fighting with, and why is it that there's a religious organization controlling everyone's sex lives. It's something so integral to the plot that it cannot be left up for the discretion of the player to engage with in the first place. The ones behind this piece of work are a fairly prominent adult video studio focused on Source, and that's all I'll say about them, just because Google them if you want to know. I am not researching these fuckers. It should be also noted that technically they're also an indie game studio now. Game development is hard, and more than enough indie studios don't get a chance to finish their own games on the grounds of it being too much to bear, from time to money. It's hard to make games, so to make a finished product, and especially one that looks this good, is worthy of commendation. Game's good, outside of the obvious Boeing 77 in the room, and who knows, I certainly can't say. The story and the setting is the weird part. If you pick this game up and play it, aside from the obvious, you'll also recognize in the background the very clearly laid out blocks of a proper space fantasy. From the millions of species living in this massive galaxy to actual government bodies with their own laws, traditions, and cultures. Drawing comparison to the review from before, if the game was less campy and more serious, it could have been more epic. I reject that. I think that this game is as campy as it needs to be, and the only thing it needed to become even more was to pay this universe they've created proper respect. Own it up. A work dealing with so many themes and underlying tones demands a certain degree of craftsmanship. Though no one ever claimed to have it in their best interests, the creation of quality narrative with deep, meaningful critique. Incidentally, it becomes what the material requires to flourish, no matter the intent behind it. One cannot push a political agenda to one of their main characters without properly building upon the ramification of theirs and by extent the state's actions. One cannot write a story about cultural oppression and religious persecution without paying the theme proper respect, granting it the critique it deserves, and properly building upon the narrative. One cannot expect their story about revolution against the tyrannical rule of the state without giving both parties, as well as the people that benefit from this campaign, building and form to reach any sort of meaningful height. And this game covers every one of these flaws by embellishing the story with something equally distracting. This is the problem with adult media, at least in my opinion, or any sort of work that deals with adult themes, namely sexual. Usually, they are the main focus, so much so the rest of the work is tacked on just to give it form. Either that, or they're so underutilized they might as well not be there at all. Fiction needs to relate to reality, and there's nothing more real than sex. Well, I can think of at least two more things, but the point is, a work of fiction is prescribed through the lens of reality. It takes what we see on a daily basis and turns it into a vision of what could be. It needs to find a common ground to the real in order to exist, and it is an age-old tactic to reward a hero with a hearty feast or a hefty sum, as well as providing closure to a story by using romance, and they lived happily ever after, to make their struggles feel that much more real, to give them a believable reason to fight and continue on until the end. All of us can relate to that. There's many ways to build upon a sexual theme. Many people suffer from identity. Many people are persecuted for the way they were born, and there's no real way to talk about these issues without touching on sex, because sex is real. Unless you're asexual. If that's the case, I'm sorry. You can tell me what you think. I can't understand you. In any case, the story unravels itself as a fairly familiar sci-fi setting, with all of your favorite tropes like androids and space pirates, ship battles in outer space, and psionically powered, all-powerful races of genocidal aliens. Our main character for this story, and through which eyes we experience the world, is this man, canonically named the Captain. He has a companion, this android here, named Demi. Subverse, in that regard, paints the main character as an unscrupulous man enamored of drugs and sex, riding the vast emptiness of space in search of his next bounty. And it's only by attacking him by his needs that others are able to make him cave to theirs. It is a perfectly well-written setting and creates an appropriate launchpad to let the shenanigans ensue. Some characters, however, do not get the same treatment and are not nearly as well written as the rest. There are some exceptions, like Dalek here, but the rest are an indulgence. Looking back on it, it is a tad unfortunate that these people did not get the same treatment, in spite of the solidly constructed background and the surprisingly well-realized setting. What happens on screen and the characters made to follow you on your journey to the end are all made specifically to facilitate the game's purpose, not necessarily to provide sufficient narrative payoff to the arc they represent, which weakens the narrative overall since all of these characters are very strictly tied to their backgrounds. The bones are all here, if you catch my drift. Relatively speaking, it can be seen as a fumble to miss the mark and let these characters ride on without any mind to their worlds and realities, only to, in the end, digitally rot in roster limbo. I can only look at these and wonder how they could have been, weeping for the resemblance of narrative fulfillment lost to the waves. I can also see both sides. Unfortunately, we all have bills to pay and time is money, so let's take what we have and do what we must. A project needs to have priorities. In a perfect world, everything would achieve the maximum it could. Every facet of a given universe meticulously constructed for the best possible outcome, perfect narrative cohesion and desired effect to the betterment of artistic integrity and critique. In any case, it's still interesting to see what has been made here with the eyes of an observer. Down to its base elements, everything works as art, from the artificial intelligence, stripped of its past, suffering from having its memories meddled with, deeply torn in between the serving role it was built to fulfill and the possibility of being able to brave the galaxy and discover who it really is. The human general carrying the legacy of her own species as they were made to suffer under a regime that inherently despises and even rejects their very existence, given the possibility to carve a future and enact revenge for centuries of injustice only to have her righteous anger used against her. 2. The scoundrel captain, endlessly running from a past of crushed dreams and unjust oppression, effectively denied his own future, who nonetheless stumbles upon a chance to become someone else and vindicate himself, carving his own future and a future for his fellows with his bare hand.
But now, this misguided rage, the chummy consorting with a scoundrel like O'Rourke. You actually remind me of Casadora more than anything. I held my tongue far too many times when she sat upon the throne, and countless lives were lost because of my misguided dedication to what I thought was honor. If that is what you are to become, then regretfully, I simply have to say, fuck this shit. I'm out.